Well, good morning. Kit Darby. I'm the president of my own company, kitdarby.com. I do not drive a pink Cadillac. But we are very, very small. We work exclusively, primarily with Delta interview preps in this part of our business. We're glad you're here. We provided a workbook, and the workbook has a great deal more information in it than I'll have time to cover today. So whereas most workbooks end up in a plastic bag in the corner that you find years later, I really recommend that you sort of read through this one. And if you have focused areas that maybe we don't spend much time today on the Pilot Record Improvement Act or much time on disclosure items, we'll talk about them. But there's a more detailed presentation in here that would give you some step-by-steps that you might want to do if you're facing some issue, whatever it might be, medical, whatever it is. There's a plan in there for sort of how to go on that. So you've got to know that you can affect this. You know, you have the ability to change the outcome of your interview. You have the ability to perhaps get an interview sooner than you might have thought. So we want you to feel empowered at the end of the day. We want you to give you the tools to make progress, get there a little bit faster. I mean, the road as it normally, just like an airway, is not exactly straight. Our goal today is to straighten that out, get you there a little bit sooner, raise the odds of success having taken the interview. You already have the best odds in the business, okay? No group is going to get interviews with the frequency that you're going to get them. And no group is going to be hired in greater quantities than your group. So you're ahead of the pack. But could we make it better? We probably could, and that's why we're here. So my background, I'm a retired United captain, 23 years after Braniff Capital Republic and then United. Retired off the 7-6, would pay for the 777 for 6 months or so. Best of both worlds, getting your current seniority and somebody else's paycheck. So it was a good deal. Since then, I was almost immediately hired by Boeing. I work as a 717 instructor in Atlanta. When AirTran sold all the 717s to Delta, Delta hired 3 of us that had been Boeing instructors for 5 or 6 years. We trained their initial cadre, their APDs and all those, and now we're just a line instructor for Delta on the 717. I've been working for Boeing for 6 or 7 years, and that work is going away, so I'm going to end my association with Boeing and work strictly with Delta. So 24,000 hour retired airline pilot type, but my real expertise has been working with like 200,000 pilots over the last 30 years that were trying to get airline jobs. And they've tried almost everything, you know, and some of it worked really well, and some of it didn't work well at all. So our goal today is to sort of pick out those things that we would suggest you do that we know work, and maybe avoid some things that we know don't work as well. Trying to get you making those steps that are most likely to be successful and avoiding some of the mistakes that the hundreds of thousands that have gone before you have made. My own background, I interviewed 30 times, you know, got hired most of the time, didn't take all the jobs, but a lot of personal experience doing it. Mike, who will be here later today, Mike Moffitt, he's a Delta longtime 7-6 first officer, could be a captain, one of those guys that manages to get his 100 hours a month every month. And he has been with us as an interviewer in our practice preparations for 15 years, and he has a lot of experience with Delta directly as an employee, and then working with us preparing people for Delta. So he's going to present the interview portion, which will primarily be 1:30, 2 o'clock until 4 this afternoon. And that information is proprietary, so it will be available only in these meetings or available from us later. Our products and services are discounted for this group 25%. So if you see a price or something somewhere, do the mental math, that would be your price, okay? I do have some price sheets, but we're not really marketing that here today. In the past, we had this information service, 200,000 customers. About 80% of the people hired back in the 80s and 90s were members of our organization. We have a very small sample of Delta. We have 35 or 40 preps that we've done. We've taken that information, compared it to our old database. Delta's right in the middle where it's always been. So the qualifications and experience, although some of this will be historical today, the small sample we have so far looks like they're doing exactly what they've done in the past, which is not a surprise. They're still doing what they've been doing. So looking at that, your goal is, of course, to model yourself after those successful candidates. We'll say that there's buckets, individual buckets. There's lady pilots, black lady pilots, you know, average white guys. There's commercial, other airlines. There's corporate, there's military. There's all these selection groups that they have, and they go from the top of this bucket. So if you're in the woman bucket and they're pulling women today, they're going to take the best woman they can find pretty much to match the percentage of qualified applicants that apply. About 15% minorities, 85% average white guys. And then among those groups, there'll be other regional pilots, military pilots, whatever. So your job is to be as high in that bucket as you can to improve your selection. That's a normal thing. In this case, captains here are moving through in seniority order and getting opportunities at Delta that are irregardless of the qualifications. There are chances, however, to interview separately with Delta outside of this agreement. It might occur sooner. So you should apply, and it is possible to jump the line, if you will, by making a normal application. Now, we're also here to talk about all the other airlines that are hiring, which is going to be virtually every major by the end of this year. Right now, the cargo guys, FedEx and UPS, they aren't quite there yet. UPS does have a total recall. They're doing better financially. Normally they lead coming out of a recession. This time cargo didn't really do that, but they're going to be back. Whether it's later this year or early next year, cargo is going to be hiring. That'll be the last couple of ones to start hiring. So it's going to be as bad as it's been, and it's been really bad. I mean, it's been awful. From the beginning of the recession, actually since 9/11, it hasn't been that good. And the recession in 08, the change in the retirement law to age 65, the combination of that sort of put everybody's career on hold for 5 or 6 years minimum. Typically about half retirements and half growth. No retirements with the change in the law, no growth with the recession, the worst possible combination. As bad as it's been, it's going to be that good again here all at once. So I know it's hard to shift gears thinking, you know, I mailed it off, I made the call, I went to the job fair, I did a visit, nothing worked, okay? And now you're going to send the same stuff off and you're going to call me with this terrible problem. I've got 2 job offers, what do I do? You know, I know that seems humorous, but I can tell you in good times I do a lot of that. We do a lot of times we're sitting there working with people that have multiple choice. After years of having no choice, I understand. So this was 5,000 pages a year that we produced of information, newsletters on who's hiring, magazines on what it's like to work there. So we have a tremendous experience with this that we're going to bring today. We're looking to talk about the job market. I mean, obviously, not just the Delta job market, which we know sort of how that arrangement works, but all the other stuff. We want to look at the hiring trends, factors that drive the hiring. I'm not trying to turn you into an economist, but the days when you could just pick any airline and it would be cool, you know, we sort of need to pay attention today. There's winners and losers in the marketplace. Many of the losers are already gone. The big list of names that are either failed or merged that we could talk about. So choices have gotten simpler. You know, it's 1 or 2 outside players left that could be incorporated in the consolidation, but most of the consolidation is over. The factors that drive the hiring, we want you to play the odds. You know what's happening. You know, one company's hiring 10, another company's hiring 10. You say, what's the difference? Well, one company's got 20 pilots, and when they hire 10, you know, you're going to be a captain tomorrow. And the other company's got 10,000 pilots, and when they hire 10, you might get a weekend off someday. All right? So what do top candidates look like? It's just model yourself after this. I had a conversation with Arnie Kraby the other day on your behalf, trying to make sure I got the feedback that I could get and bring it directly from you. And the one thing that he said he could emphasize is preparation. And we are all about preparation. You know, if he could give you any advice, it would be preparation. If he has a problem that he sees perhaps in the interview, it's preparation. So we're trying to get you motivated. This is like the big check ride. You know, they're trying to get you studying and working on this, realizing it's a job to get a job. And to really get out there and study, because I can tell you, this is one of the best opportunities at Delta in the business. When you look at all the combination of factors, their economic success, their growth plans, their innovativeness in the marketplace, their retirements, all the things that would make this a great opportunity, Delta, and not just because I work there, I mean, on an objective basis, they offer one of the best opportunities in the business. So you have a great opportunity there. We'll focus on that, try to make you that top candidate. We'll talk about career values. For 2 reasons. I mean, we hear a lot in the media about the $20,000 a year regional co-pilot, and there's no doubt that that's not a living wage, okay? Not a living wage. We'll say that right up front. We're working hard to make that, not my job, but as a reporter, I'll say the industry and your union are working hard to change that. But it's going to be a slow process. But you need to know that these other jobs, the major jobs, which you're probably aware of, but there's a lot of myths, you know, that retirement is gone. Retirement's not gone. What is the retirement at American, United, and Delta? 15, 16% company paid. The American average, 2 or 3%. On a paycheck that's 2 or 3 times larger to start with. that yields a retirement after 25, 30, 35 years, $3 million, $4 million lump sum. Retirement's not dead. Retirement's as good as it's ever been. There was a time right after 9/11 and with the recession that retirements weren't as good, but this latest round of contracts have really brought it back. Pay is pretty much back. Retirement's back. If anything, it's better than it was. My retirement, about the same percentage being invested, but I didn't control it. Now you get 16% and it's yours the day it goes in the account. They can't take it back. If you leave, you take it with you. Far better than mine. Okay, I had a great retirement. Ended up on the PBGC, Peanut Butter and Jelly Corporation, okay, which is just a fraction of what I was entitled to. All right, so know that retirements are back. Delta Airlines interview, we're going to be very specific about that. This is a briefing that if you call us on the phone and said, I've got a Delta interview, what should I do? We would say, send us your resume. Delta doesn't use resumes, but we want to see it, and other airlines do. And then we want to see your airline apps. With that in hand, we're going to critique that, bring you into Atlanta, sit you down, do a little mini interview right up front, see how you're doing. And then we're going to turn that off and we're going to train for a while, talk about the approach and how we want to do it. Then we're going to turn the camera back on and we're going to record again. And then we're going to critique those and we're going to record that as well. And you're going to walk away with a DVD with your mini interview, your full interview, and a critique of that. And you're going to go home, probably not going to see that on YouTube anytime soon, because invariably when we do our little home video here, we find things that we can't really say or what we want to present in the interview. So you're going to learn stuff about yourself, and hopefully you would do that a week or two out, and you can study that video and get a little better. In a worst case situation, and there's many cases where you can't get to Atlanta in advance, that you're going to do it the day before, even the evening before, we understand. But that process, that would normally be $495, so $395 for you guys, okay? And that process would take 3 hours in Atlanta, our office right on the airport, not in the airport, but right on the north edge. Right, if you know where the Concourse Hotel is there, then it's right next to that. It's the old ASA headquarters building. So we're right in that to provide that service. So that's what you would do. Now we also offer by phone and by Skype the same type of service. And each one of those has a workbook that will have the slides you will see for the Delta interview prep in it. Now our products are no longer open PDFs where I give it to you and you can give it to all your friends. It's a secure PDF. So you get a file, which anybody can have. You get a reader, separate reader, secure reader, anybody can have the reader, and then you get a code. And on your computer with that code is the only way you can view that file. And when you're done with your interview, plus a day or two, it goes away. So that's how we deliver our information now. So that's what you would get. And we're working on making this book, and we also have a set of flashcards. If you remember our book, we had a book called Questions. It was our most popular book. We've taken all those questions and put them into a flashcard application on the iPhone, and soon to be on the iPad and the Touch. So you can be on the crew bus doing your aeronautical knowledge study with question, answer, and reference. Now that's a $24.99 product, and we're working to get a special deal for you guys. It's going to require that you give me your email in order to deliver the product. And that product is a iTunes App Store product. For those that don't have iPhone or Apple products, we will also have a PDF, secure PDF, that has the same information, question, answer, and reference. That's on the technical questions. On HR questions, we provide questions, but we don't provide answers. We really believe that if you try to give my answer or somebody else's answer, that it's not going to work. There's all kinds of body language things, inflection. The interviewer may not even know what's wrong, but they'll know something's wrong. So you simply must develop and give your own stories. And I know you're thinking, oh my God, there's hundreds of questions and I'm going to need hundreds of scenarios to answer all these questions. Not true. There's going to be a question about conflict. There's going to be a question about your leadership style. There's going to be small questions. And 4 or 5 scenarios are going to cover these hundreds of questions. So when you come to us, if you work with us, either by phone, Skype, or face-to-face, we're going to say, that's not a good example. I mean, it gets into areas where you can't win. Okay, or that's a pretty good example, but could we improve the score? Is there a way that we could leave 1 or 2 things out which were negative? Maybe we could enhance these things that were good. We're going to try to raise your score. And the scoring system is typically 1 to 5, and we're not hiring 1s and 2s today. We're hiring 3, 4s, and 5s. So if we can take a 2 answer and turn it into a 3 or a 3 into a 4, we can advance your career. That's what we're trying to do. So we're working hard on that. The objective, up-to-date information, so you're making good decisions based on current information. A lot of the stuff that's happened in the last 5 years, the discouraging news is going away. So you need to now adapt your plan to the new information. Develop you as a good candidate for Delta and other airlines. Provide typical career values, so we're hoping that will be partially motivational to see how quickly you can get back even with where you are today and be ahead the rest of your life. Understand the recruitment environment. There's a lot of play in the game. We have a lot of older pilots here with lots of experience. Typical older pilot with experience takes this approach. I'm well qualified and experienced. If I don't screw this up, I'll get the job. So I'm going to sit on my hands and I want to keep my mouth shut, not screw up, and I'll get this job. Doesn't work that way, okay? You've got to get in there and sell yourself. There's nobody else in the room to sell yourself. If your mother went to a party and talked about you, they would eventually shut her up. If you did it, they'd throw you out immediately. Okay? But in this environment, there's nobody else in the room. Mom's not there. You're the only one. You've got to sell this thing. And that is very uncomfortable in our society. So the way to get over that is to get some practice again, either at home in front of the video with your spouse or with us in front of our video, other interview opportunities, practice interviews with another company. I don't care, but you have got to get some practice. I relate this to the ILS. When we went to ground school, we learned all about how the box worked and where the antenna was and how these things are supposed to go on the flight director. And then we went out and we tried it. How'd it go the first time? You know, wasn't exactly like we want. Today, it's good. What's the difference? Practice, okay, practice. So we've got to get you some, and even the first little bit of practice. I mean, if we can just get you to focus on this for an hour or two, it's going to be way better than to just walk in there and say, see how it goes. And in areas where you haven't addressed, if you have a problem or something you're uncomfortable with, if you haven't talked about that before, I would say at best it's 50-50 that's going to go like you want. After a little bit of practice, odds come way up. Okay, so practice with us, practice on your own, but don't go try this ILS the first time without some practice. Go arounds, I mean, that's not what we're shooting for here. We're looking for landings. They don't have to be pretty. We just have to get it on the ground this time and change ID cards. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. The market, of course, has changed over time. We call this shark's teeth, okay? Up and down. I mean, this is an up and down business. If you're not prepared for up and down, you're probably in the wrong business. And I can't deliver a consistent job market for you that you can plan on for 5 years and go out to get the job on May of 2014. You know, isn't going to happen. We're going to have to know that it's up and down. So we make a general look at it. We know that it's sort of not as bad as it is in bad times and not as good as it is in good times. And we make a slow, steady pressure. We're applying ourselves in a steady manner. We're not working really hard when the market's good and not at all when the market's bad. We're making this steady push toward this thing all the time. That will produce the best results. It, however, is not human nature. We tend to get all revved up, do a whole bunch of stuff, and then fall out of the market for 6 months waiting for the phone to ring or the email to come in. You know, what I need you to do is make a list, work it down from the top, consistent checklist type approach, pushing on this thing on a regular basis. Going to the job fairs, making the phone calls, sending the emails, following up with your friends, building a network among Endeavor pilots of what's happening to Endeavor pilots in the rest of the industry. It's great to have a network. My network, when I got my first job, I was out of the military. I was Army, so I wasn't really military, not in their eyes. You know, I wasn't Air Force, Navy or something. So we had this network. I was working at Flight International, and we had our students were part of our network. So when airlines started calling for interviews, they would call back and say, yeah, they're calling. So I'm in the simulator. It was actually a high-level FTD, training flight engineers. And they had the old phone with the push buttons on it, you know. So the phone lights up and somebody buzzes in and says, hey, Braniff is calling. Cool, you know, so I'm sitting there, yeah, watch this, loss of all generators, you know. And then the light comes on and it stops and you can tell the secretary's picked it up and the light comes on in the sim and it says, Braniff on line 2. So I literally watched the phone ring. My network was so good that I know the calls were coming and I was watching the phone light up when the thing came in. Now today it's going to be an email or, you know, some other method, but it's not going to be the phone probably. So but my network was so good, I knew it was coming. And that's what I want you guys to do, to work together. You learn tidbits of information, share them back and forth, make this an awareness among the group. All right, so go back, we look at, we had 500 jobs in 93, 5,000 jobs in 99, 500 jobs in 03. We're ramping back up in 08, and what happens? Recession. So it went back down. The lowest we'd ever seen was 500, and in '09, combination of the economic recession and no retirements due to the change in the age 65 rule, we hired 30 pilots at the majors, 30, down by a factor of 10, over the lowest year we'd ever seen since I've been tracking it, which is 30 years. So it's been a nasty time. Now this is historical information, number of pilots, total pilots, and the majors are at the top, of course. They've come back up a little bit. Aircraft pilots hired by segment. The national segment, the one you're in now, has been hiring more pilots every month, every year for like 10 years because they had their own growth and they were losing pilots off the top and some off the bottom. So a lot of hiring. Okay, we're looking at the U.S. economic recovery to drive this. It is very much profitability driven. In the past, when the airlines hired, Delta, United hired 1,000 pilots a year when they made $1 billion a year. What did Delta just report? 3 point something? And now they're not just Delta, they're Delta and Northwest. I mean, the potential is there for these individual companies to hire 1,000 a year, maybe even 1,500 a year. And Delta came out and said 300, and now they said 600. They don't have any idea what they need. And they are way underestimating what they need. They've already doubled it. They could double it again. 1,200, now, yeah, I can believe that. Then what's going to hold them back is their ability to train. How fast can they train pilots? And on the 717, I'm part of that initial training process. So come on down. I would love to be your initial instructor. All right. 8 of the 11 airlines are hiring. 2 of them are cargo companies that we know will be coming back soon. UPS, when they have a recall and they get total recall, if that trend continues, that turns into hiring. And we know that's going to happen at these freight companies real soon. Domestic growth of low cost. Low cost is a segment that's been gaining market share for the last 10, 12, 15 years. Probably going to continue to do that, although not as quickly, but still faster growth. And growth means promotion for you. If you're a captain now and would like to get back to the left seat as quickly as possible, we certainly understand that. And most people feel that way. Not everybody, however. Like I said, Mike will be here today, long-term 767 first officer, makes more than most captains by flying additional hours as an international co-pilot and picking his schedule, rather than being on reserve as a 737 or Airbus or 717 captain. All right, so furloughs, I had to add my 2014 estimate here, but we're down to 1,300 right now, and they really aren't on furlough, okay? We got what we call holdbacks. Delta recalls everybody, and a couple of hundred don't come back. American, United recall everybody, and 1,000 don't come back, okay? They did not come back forever. They have a period of time that they can come back, and they're simply holding. Actually, a pretty smart decision. If you have a job and you get recalled on the bottom of a list, and the things were to go the other way, you could be furloughed again. So you could go from one job to no jobs. But if you have a job and you have a recall rights, you have 2 jobs. And if you hold this one, even though it may not be as good for a career a while, if this one goes up and down, you still have a job. You wait until you're off reserve. Now when you go back to that job, you control your life. If you're a commuter, for instance, that might be real important. So having 2 jobs, even though the one you have may not be quite as good as the ultimate one, makes a lot of sense. So a lot of these holdouts are doing the right thing. They're going to finish whatever they're doing, get their life under control, get off reserve, go back and still be a Delta, United, American pilot. So they sort of got a backup plan. And that's what these furloughs are. They're not people that they've recalled everyone at all those companies. So looking at the hiring projections, 5,200 or so. That's based on about 2,500 at the majors, and most of that 2,500 coming from the regionals. So 2,500 produces 5,000 jobs. That's without any retirements or growth at their own airlines. So it's going to probably be that high. 8,000 or so in 15. 2013 was a better year for income for the airlines and hiring than we've seen since the recession. Profits were in 13 were $7 billion, pretty good, up from 360 million in 11. So really getting better. We got a combination of recession ending and the age 65 retirement age change that held the hiring down significantly for 5 years. It's really been a tough time. So factors that affect the hiring, obviously airplanes. I mean, if there's airplanes, pilots are flying those airplanes, that's great, but it's not quite that simple. It's got to be airplanes times utilization. And I've had this argument before. I've predicted some booms in the past, and everybody says, oh, Darby, you're smoking dope, because there are no more airplanes, or not a lot more airplanes coming. How can we need a lot more pilots? Well, if we went from 8 hours a day to 10 hours a day on our airplanes, how many more pilots would we need? 25% more pilots. How many major airline pilots are there? About 60,000. Okay, we're talking about resumes. So resumes are not fun. Our pilots are not good at it. Can't necessarily spell or punctuate. We're not that good with the word processing. Resumes are heavily formatted. So resumes are an issue. Do you need one at Delta? No. Do you need one if you want a recommendation at Delta so you can show to your friend before he recommends you? Yes. Do you need one at a job fair? Yes, when you hand it in. If you're going to email or send off your resume in the regular mail, you need a cover letter and a resume. If you're not there to present it, then you need a cover letter. So we'll talk about those. I don't say they're fun, but we do have a book, an e-book now, and a reminder that, again, all our products are secure PDFs. In the case of a book like this, you get it for a year. You can print it twice, and then it goes away. All right? You have to have the file, the reader, be on one computer, and have a code to look at it. You can't be shared. This is the interview link. Whether it's if you're walking up in a job fair and you're hoping to make an impression, they're going to take that resume back and correlate it to their files, and it maybe help your position in the interview sequence. If your friend is going to write this impressive letter for you about how great you are, it's really helpful for him to have a chronological view of your education, work experience, flight time, and ratings. He can add a lot of meat to that recommendation. If it's just, oh yeah, Bob, I know Bob, he's a good guy, not as impressive. So give him the details. This is your first impression. So a lot of times that resume going back with them to the home office, you're no longer there, looking sharp, talking smart, All that's left is the paperwork. So we need to get the paperwork right. A resume sample on page 62, a letter of recommendation on 63, and then we also have what we call a straight line resume. Resumes are heavily formatted. If you're pasting this resume into an open box on an application process, you need to be careful, because it's heavily formatted. It just goes crazy sometimes when they have different tabs, different fonts. It just turns it into garbage. So the person's trying to read across the line, and there's total time, but there's no number by it. So they're trying to figure out what number below that is your total time to see if you qualify for this job. You're making their life hell. So we recommend PDFs. If you can make a PDF and attach a PDF, please do so. If you're going to do Word, then we might recommend that you use this straight line resume, which takes each fact to a single line. Total time, 10,000. Turbine PIC, 8,000. One line fact at a time, so it doesn't go all over the page when you do it. So when you're pasting it in, the worst thing you can do is paste a heavily formatted Word document into an open box like that, and you'll see sometimes it just looks like you shotgun the words onto the page. There is a letter recommendation additional process at Delta, which we'll talk about. Are you familiar? You've probably been briefed on that before. But other than your airline apps where you put in your recommendations, we would recommend 2 or 3 good ones as a minimum. There are airlines like Southwest where we would recommend as many as you can get. We frequently see 8, 10, 12 recommendations. But there's a separate email address other than airline apps at Delta where your pilot friends at Delta can recommend you in a traditional recommendation process. And outside of this process, that moves you to the top of the list. That list is taken first, let's put it that way. And that address, we'll show it on the screen here in just a minute. So if you're trying to get the job outside of this process, you need to have your friends recommend you in that manner. And they should know about it. I will show you more about it today. So on your resume, no negatives. You don't need to put the 3 axe murders on the resume, okay? Not required. It's presenting your best foot forward, but you do need to show how you meet or exceed minimum requirements, which means you open up the minimums for each of the airlines that you're applying to and make sure that information is on your resume. They're standardized disclosure, of course. You're going to sign it at some point, so you need to have it like you want. If you want to change it now from what you learned today, that's probably not a problem. Delta's not going to print this thing out and use it inside of a week or so. So you can make changes, that's okay. But don't make them inside of a week or so because they're going to print it and use that. Now they will ask you if there's any changes, and if you found something really horrific, you could change it in the interview. But the last thing we really want is handwritten notes on your application if they aren't necessary. Everybody's using internet and email now. You need, of course, if you've got that old beat-up laptop with a browser that's 4 versions back, it's not going to necessarily work well with these online applications. So you got to have reasonable bandwidth, up-to-date computer, up-to-date software. Keep it that way, or you're going to introduce big problems in your process and the follow-up. You need a professional email address. No matter how sexy your current email address might be, it's time for a straightforward professional. Just get a separate one if necessary. They're free, not a big deal. Special formatting, we talked about that. Cutting and pasting, it's okay to cut and paste. It's okay. As a matter of fact, it's preferable, especially you got a big block, you're writing out all about this issue on your application, and you're done, right? No, you're not done, because you can't spell and punctuate. So you mark it, cut it, put it in a word processor, check it, cut it, and put it back. Don't trust yourself. We see the damnedest typos. I mean, I can't tell you how awful some of them are. So the straight text examples on 64, where we remove all the formatting, we prefer the PDF. Document labels. How many resumes do you think I see? I mean, I see a bunch of resumes every day. And guess what 80% of them say? Resume. Now I got to go back and find that resume. Is it Bob or Jim or Jane? God, I don't know. When did it come in? I mean, give us a file name that at least gives us your name so we can find you. Now, if you want to put, Bob Jones's resume, that's okay, but just resume doesn't cut it. All right? Easy to identify subject line. Ladies, be careful. If you don't tell them what you want to do, you're going to end up in the flight attendant pile. I mean, that's how it happens. So tell me what you want in your letter, in your objective on your resume. Design one resume, because we can't be doing a separate resume. We've got 13 major airlines, 8 of them are hiring. Do we need 13 different resumes? No. We need to design a format that includes all the things that all the airlines want. So all we have to do is update the flight times as we go along. We can't be customizing. Because invariably, the more customizing you do, eventually UPS gets FedEx's resume. I mean, be careful. Okay, about the only thing I might customize would be the objective, but I'd be real careful about trying to have different versions of everything for everybody. I've seen that happen at job fairs. Walk up in person and hand the wrong resume to the person. Oh, not good. All right. Keywords, of course, they're looking for the minimums, and then keywords help them find the scorable items. So you need to be pointing out how you meet or exceed their minimums, and say it the same way they say it, same way the regulations say it. To get started, you need your certificates and ratings, flight time breakout, work history, formal education, technical training, specialized training. You need to gather all this stuff up. And some of us have been around a while. We don't really need your recurrence, but we are interested in your initial upgrades and transitions. And we'd also like to know where you got your primary training if there's room on the resume. So that's a lot of stuff. You might be talking to your mom or your friend or your spouse, trying to piece this together. Get it all together, get it accurate. Conduct a background check on yourself, basically. You need your airman's record, personnel records, training records, driving records. If there's any issues in this, now you need to see the records. All right? What you're going to put down has to match the record. The airlines are not omnipotent. They don't know at all. They only know consistency between what you write on your resume, what you put in your application, what you say in the interview, and eventually what they background check has to match. If it doesn't match, you're not necessarily a good guy. That's why we want you to study your resume and application so close before you go in, so you're talking comfortably about those dates and times, because sometimes we're not really sure that you are who you say you are, even though it's your story, because you're just not that familiar with when you got your college and when you got qualified on this or that, how long it took you to make captain, whatever. Know yourself and know the records. If you have any problem, my first question will be, have you checked the record? Go look at the training record, see what it says. You had a check ride bust. In your mind, it was a horrible situation with a fist fight in the simulator. And in the training record, it says, failed single engine go around, 1 hour training, recheck. Okay. And you're trying to give me all these details about how the co-pilot failed to pull the gear up and you couldn't get him to pull the gear up and you finally had to hit him to get him to pull the gear up. I don't need to know that, okay? All I want to know is what the record says. Any additional details would be provided by you on an optional basis. Now, you will want to tell a full story, but they don't have anything but the record and what you say to describe that story. While we're talking about stories, that story should be what we call an NTSB accident report. Just the facts. Okay? It's their decision, no editorializing. And the check pilot for giving me this triple compound failure was an idiot. No, thank you. Okay, I want to know, give me the triple compound failures. Let me decide whether he's an idiot, not your decision. Okay? So the NTSB accident report says something like the wind was 60 knots from the left and the Piper Cub departed the runway to the right. It doesn't say the guy was an idiot for flying a Piper Cub and 5 times its rated crosswind. It just says the facts. That's your job, present the facts. The decision remains theirs. So we want to use this format, when, where, what. It comes off of paper applications. If you look at paper applications, most of the online applications are a duplication of that. When you did it, the date's very important to me. A lot of bad advice on the internet about leaving dates off. I want to know whether it took you 6 years to do a 4-year degree or 3 years to do a 4-year degree. I want to know when you upgraded and why you upgraded. I want to know your transitions and decisions you made along the way, and I can't tell that if you don't give me the dates. So give me the dates. Where, that's simply a mailable address, a full address of your company, street address, city, state, and zip code. Now those are small, no points much in that. And then the what, that is where we score the points. We use the same format for work history, formal education, and technical training. Consistency, easy to read. That means they know how to score it, they know where it's at, they find it, they score it quickly, they move on. If they get a phone call or somebody at the door and an interruption, they know the format, they go right back in and get into it and finish the scoring, you lose no points. If it's a large paragraph of written information, they've got to find, hopefully start in the right place, not miss anything. And if they miss something, they might lose a good candidate. What do you lose? A good career. Really important to use a standard, easy to read format. Reverse chronological order, things coming down from the top. Last thing you did, next to last thing you did, that type of thing. Show a complete work history. Now for Delta, on the application, that's one of the problems. If you don't show a complete work history, they're going to bump this thing. They have to have everything you did covered in some way between the time you finished your formal education and today. They don't, even though you might have been around a long time, they want to know it all on the application. Your resume should do the same thing, but we can use, obviously don't have enough room for every job if you had a bunch of them. So we're going to state the first 3 or 4, and then we're going to make a statement. It says prior to this date, which is the date of the last job, and this date, which is when I went to school, I did this, this, and this, just so you've covered it. Do not include personal information, birth date, marital status, age, race. How would you like to be the person with the black magic marker that gets to go through the resumes and take out the personal information before the other person gets to see it? Boy, there's a really sweet job. And how would you like to be the person getting the resume, who is a resume snob, by the way, because all they see are resumes, they're working with them every day, they get very snooty about resumes, and now you've had these 5 beautiful resumes, and now you get one with these big black marks all over it. You go, ooh, you have revulsion in the beginning. So don't put personal information on there. Complete flight time breakout includes total time, turbine, PIC, all that stuff. You've got to do this from their application. If you have less than 8 or 9 breakouts, you haven't covered it. Okay, you cannot cover the flight time breakouts needed for the major airline applications in under about 8 or 9 breaks. You've got to have all the things they require listed. Now we're working a bunch of different airlines, so it's all got to be broken out. Whatever it is. By the way, we're looking on nighttime. We're looking for about 10% night and separately 10% instrument if you're looking as a guideline. So if you don't have 10% instrument, be sure to include your hood, your simulator time, that kind of stuff. So Health Space ought to know. Your nighttime. I know you're flying in a jet. I know you're flying on instruments at night. So give me that stuff. Put it together. Log your flight time. Going forward, if you need a little more instrument time, be a little more aggressive about logging it. Keywords, we're looking in there, attention getters. You got to, the must-haves. The person that does this resume screening is not the person that does the hiring. There's a clerk person in the office that's been designated to do this. They've been trained what to do, and they say, go down this resume and find where the person meets the minimums. And here's the minimums. This much total time, this much education, this highest rating, whatever. We're working down. And then the desirables, these are preferred things. We like people that were previously flight instructors. We like people that were previously military instructors. We like people with degrees from aviation schools. These are desirable things, and those produce points. At the end of the day, we draw a line, we add them up, we say if we have 34 or more, we'll call them in for an interview. If they have 34 or less, they stay in the pile. My job is to get you the highest possible score on this resume. Highest number of desirables wins, because everybody meets the minimums, right? If you didn't meet the minimums, you're not even in the pile. And that's why if you don't put the minimums on the resume, so I know this, it's got 10,000 hours. I know that they've got a little bit of instrument time in here, but guess what? It's not on this resume. I know they got it. So do I give them a break or not? I don't know. All right, cover letters. Cover letters, for some reason, are even harder than resumes. Resumes are heavily formatted, very difficult to type, but we can get that done somehow. But cover letters, just some pilots just freeze up when it says cover letter. I mean, in our society, talking about yourself is unacceptable. In a cover letter, you're talking about yourself. It causes great angst to create cover letters that say good things about ourselves. But you're not there. Your mother's not there. It's all we got. Hopefully the cover letter is going to show them how you meet or exceed their minimums. You're going to tell them what you want to do, show them how you meet or exceed their minimums, tell them you love them, all the great things about Delta Airlines or whoever, and finally ask for action. I want an interview. Call me. Write me. You know? All right. So, accompanies a mail resume, introduces your resume, request application or interview, not used when hand delivered. Literally, when you give them a cover letter and it's hand delivered, they go back to the room and they put resume, trash, resume, cover letter in the trash. They just can't deal with it, okay? They've got a pile of 200 resumes, and some of them have cover letters and some don't, you know? And that's why it's got to be one page, because page 2 gets separated from page 1 and there's 200 of them. Now you got half a resume, and it might be the back half without your name on it, you know? So we don't do 2-page resumes. Emphasize what's changed when you're talking about it. Proper business protocol when the resume is mailed or emails to include a cover letter. Personalize your correspondence, should be unique and appropriate. Don't copy examples, ours or anybody else's. There was a time when we probably did 80% of the resumes in the business. And the airlines would tell us on a regular basis that, yeah, we got one of your page 4s yesterday. You know, a guy had just exactly copied our resume kit's example cover letter, word for word. You know, changed the name to protect the guilty. So don't do it. You've got to work on it. Ask for help. It's okay. I mean, you're not a journalist. You're not a professional writer. Find somebody in your family or friends that can help you out. And even if you are all those things, the top writer around, step away from it for a day, come back, look at it again, and still show it to your friends and relatives, because you just get too close to the forest to see the trees. You know, we make the damnedest mistakes. Employment applications. Definitely applying to Delta. Paper, of course, there are a few still, but mostly electronic online. Follow instructions. And you're saying, you know, there's not a lot of instructions with this thing. But you know that little circle over on the side with the question mark in it that says if you have a question about this section, we have help? You need to read every one of those, because you're going to say, oh, I know what that means, but I'll just look over here and be sure. And you go, oh my God, that's not what I thought it was at all. Damn, I've got to make some changes here. Read the help section, whether you think you need it or not. Assume everything's important. You want to drive them crazy? Have a question on this application, every one of which is important, and don't answer it. Did you forget to answer it? Do you not want to answer it because it's a negative area? I just don't know. I'm going to assume you're a good person, I guess, but I got to have the people that are getting letters back, and they're sending out hundreds of emails now that says your application has a problem. About 90% of those letters are something you didn't answer. I had this guy just a couple of days ago, well-qualified applicant, had like 4 letters from Delta about not filling it. You know, you don't have a salary in this situation. You don't have this or that. And I said, look, I want to see your application. I mean, I don't want to just talk about it. I do provide counseling, but when we talk about applications, I want to see it. Print the PDF and send me your application. So I'm reading down this thing. I found 4 more areas that had blanks. One of which was, do you have 121 experience? Yes. And the next line was, how many hours? Blank. What? That's the kind of stuff computers go looking for. It says, if this box is checked, there should be something in this box. So you check this one and nothing in that one. I can guarantee you the computer's going, you know. Salaries. Well, I didn't have a salary, you know. I don't remember what it was. Tax returns, estimate. Do NA if you can't come up with one. So this guy, for instance, had no grade point average in his education, part of which was flight training. So he went back and gave himself a 4.0 on his private commercial instrument CFI II MEI. I said, A 4.0, did they actually grade you? Well, no, but it said I had to have something in this box. That would be a good place for an NA, okay? Geez. Assume everything's important, complete the application in its entirety, read the help section closely. Look at the flight time worksheet carefully. This thing would be a good thing to put it in Excel, right? I mean, you need it to add up and down, and left and right. I can assure you the computer does that. Up and down, left and right, before you start filling in these boxes. An online commercial logbook program is fine. They're very handy. But we're going to recommend in the actual interview that you bring your actual logbook, whatever it is, electronic or otherwise, red books, whatever, and have on top of it a one-page summary that says, during these years I worked at this airline, flew these airplanes in this seat this many hours. One page, couple of lines. They're going to take the logbooks, they're going to sort of weigh them, they're going to look at the cover sheet and go, okay. They might flip through a few pages. But for a highly experienced pilot, I mean, when I interviewed with EOS, I had 24,000 hours. They didn't spend a lot of time on my logbooks, all right? But when I interviewed initially, and I was at, 3,000 or 4,000 hours, they're going through them with a fine-tooth comb. So, no, quality and quantity are being evaluated here. We want lots of flight time, and we like it in higher, faster, more motors, the better. Some allow conversion factors. That's military. Don't worry about it. FAR 6151 logging flight time. This is how you keep a logbook. This is how you keep a resume. This is how you do it. But there are 5 or 6 airlines that are using what's called Part 1 PIC, which is not how you keep a logbook and not how you do your resume. But since they're asking for it and it's their dance, that is how we do it for that airline. So you need a separate column in your logbook for not the normal PIC time, but for Part 1 PIC time, which we'll go over here in just a minute. So sole manipulator, sole occupant, acting as PIC, instructing, these are all PIC times, and you can have more than one person logging PIC time at the same time. And that's normal. However, Part 1 PIC, because they were having trouble differentiating the PIC time, they chose to use this definition of PIC rather than how you log flight time, and that is only one person. On my 767, on my 3.5-hour nap on the way to Europe, when I'm signed for the airplane and I'm in the back taking a nap, I'm the only one logging PIC time under this definition. My co-pilots, one of which, or both of which are probably type-rated, one in the right seat, one in the left seat, are not logging PIC time. This takes PIC time away from everybody. Okay, it's not a good feeling, but it's what they've asked for, and that's what you got to give them. And if you don't have a separate page in your logbook and you want to go back and figure it out a few years later, good luck. Okay, so figure it out best you can now, and going forward, keep track. Now, in this operation where you have captains and co-pilots and there's 2 pilots in the plane, not a big problem. But there are places where it's a problem. Okay, common problems we see, reason for leaving. They're going to be keen on that. When you leave, if you go up laterally or go up, that makes sense. If you go down, a little red flag comes up and says, oh, why did you do that? Personality conflict, training failure, something's going on. Know that those questions are coming. Fired from a job? My first question is always going to be, what does the paperwork say? You've got this elaborate story about how you didn't get along with your boss and just because you were dating his daughter and didn't bring her home one night, what the heck? And all the thing says was this, one little word. You didn't have to go into that story. What does the record say? Document FAA accidents and incidents. You're probably going to want, when it gets into the more complicated things, you're going to want to take a page or two, one if you can, and make a short factual description of what happened and sign your name to it. It's an addendum, and you're going to have it with you. And the fact that you're willing to put it in writing and sign your name to it is going to make it more believable. And that's where you can put in all the facts. Like I said, you can say the 4 compound emergencies the guy gave you, but you can't say that was unreasonable for him to do that. Let them decide. Okay, disclosure is required. Okay, talk to somebody. First check the records, and then talk with somebody, and then probably practice what you're going to do there. Write this addendum and practice talking about it. Believe me, even though it may be totally truthful, if you're not comfortable talking to me about it, I'm going to sense that. If I can't get comfortable, if you can't get comfortable, how do you expect me to get comfortable? If you're sitting there, well, it was, looking down, and, it's going to be hard for me to get comfortable about that. This whole thing's about developing and preserving the warm, fuzzy feeling. It's like trying to get the date with the pretty girl, the second date with the pretty girl, and you're talking to the mother. and she hands you the smoked oyster on the cracker you've never had before, and you pop it in there and it tastes dead, and what do you say? Delicious. May I have another? Okay, this is social. So when we're getting in there and talking about this, we're setting this thing up. We've got to preserve this warm, fuzzy feeling. So practice helps you do that. Delta application process, we have blank spaces in salary, flight hours, ratings, GPAs. Use something, but not inappropriate. Don't give yourself a 4.0 on your private. Incomplete work history and education must cover from high school, yes, high school, to today. And yes, that might take several pages for older candidates. But you got to fill it in one by one. Now, if you have a small gap, you need to put it in unemployment. I mean, it's perfectly normal to be in between jobs from time to time as you move from one place to another. Don't be afraid to fill it in. If it's not complete, if you say, oh, it was only a couple of months, and you leave it out, the computer goes date, gap, sends you a letter, says, we'd love to continue with your application process, but your application has a problem. Please look at work history. Thanks a lot. You just cost yourself 3 months of seniority at Delta, which is probably one of the best airline jobs in America. So you know it's coming. Out-of-date information. We would love to process your application, but your Class 1 medical has expired. And you didn't bother to go into Air Apps, even though you got another one, and fill in the blank and tell them that you renewed it, because we have to have our minimum requirement. Not following instructions. So you get the present job, and then it asks your next job after it, and guess what? You put your present job again. It says your first language is English, and your next language is English. No. Okay, maybe you don't have a next language, that's okay, but they're not both English. The computer goes, this field matches this field. Okay? Letters of recommendation, we can't tell you how important. I'm going to say that other airlines, other than the Delta process that we have here, other airlines, you're going to get hired at airlines that you have recommendations. I'm going to go so far as to say that. And you're going to tell me, well, Kit, I really want to work for Southwest, but guess what? I don't know anybody at Southwest. And I'm going to say, Bob, you're a really nice guy. You won't need a recommendation. I wish I could do that, but I can't. I don't have that kind of power. What I can tell you is, Bob, if you don't have a recommendation, odds are you're not going to work at Southwest. So you say, well, I don't know anybody. And I'm going to say, okay, here's my secret to that. 5 important phone calls. 5 of the most important phone calls you're going to make in your career that you're going to think about each one for like a day before you make the call. And it starts out with, who do I know at Southwest Airlines? If I don't know anybody at Southwest, who do I know that's an airline person in a base that Southwest operates out of? Baltimore, Chicago, Dallas, whatever. I haven't made the phone call yet. I'm just thinking about it. I'm going to think that all the way to the end to make the very best phone calls I can make to find the people that I know or somebody I know that knows somebody that works at Southwest. And then I'm going to buy them a beer, take them to dinner, ride their jump seat, date their ugly sister, whatever it takes. Okay? Because I've got to have this recommendation. And you're going to have to work at it. And every airline that you want to work for has that same requirement. So when I say getting a job is a full-time job and you need a recommendation, that now becomes a full-time job. Because 1 or 2, okay, 3 at most airlines, but Southwest, I'm like looking for 10. This is a lot of work. And you got to be smart about it. You have an ID card, ride the jump seat. You know where they lay over, buy them a beer at the bar. Go sit by the pool. Do whatever it takes. This is not optional, okay? Other than Delta, which you begin to appreciate your Delta process now, but that's how it's going to work elsewhere. The person should be a good person. If this guy's a jerk at your airline and he's gotten hired at United, guess what? He's probably still a jerk, okay? As bad as you need a recommendation, that's not the guy. All right? The person has to be a good person. Okay, they really need to be a Delta employee. There's accountability here. If the person that's recommending me doesn't work at my company and you turn out to be a jerk, I have no recourse. I want people that are accountable to me, that make recommendations, and if you're a jerk, I can go back and say, hey, you recommended Bob and he was a jerk. We fired him in the new hire class. Don't do that again. If you do that again, we're not going to take your recommendations anymore. That's accountability. But don't know this guy, works at another airline, writes a flowery recommendation, doesn't hold a lot of weight. I want to go so far as to say the recommendations that do get you hired are going to be company employees. Doesn't have to be a pilot, company employee. It could be a flight attendant, a mechanic, or whatever. It'd be better if they were higher up in the food chain. It'd be great if they were a senior training captain. But a new hire who's done well and is well liked can get you hired at that airline with a recommendation. So all the Endeavor pilots that go before you at other places need to stay in touch with them, and they need to be recommending their buddies. While we're talking about that, if you go into this interview unprepared, don't do well, and fail out, you're basically pooping in the nest of all the other Endeavor pilots. Because they're going to, when you walk in, you're carrying how the performance has been of all the other Endeavor pilots. So if you can't get ready for this, if you can't get excited about this interview and do well, you do your friends a favor not to go. Be serious about it. Letters of recommendation come from everybody. I've already hit that, every possible network you can think of. They should say how you know each other. So we're talking about, okay, I met here, did that this many years, that you're a good moral, personal character. Comment on your piloting skills if at all possible. I mean, I've had guys fly airplanes to my location to take me flying because I don't recommend people I haven't flown with. Oh, well, we'll fix that. How about tomorrow lunch and the airplane will be on the ramp? Okay, business jet, you're bringing it here? Okay. State why you'll be a good employee and provide personal contact information. So we're going through this process where we're looking at you and we're going down, you go through the interview, sim check, testing, all that kind of stuff, and then 2 weeks later there's a hiring board where the people that interview probably not even in the board, so nobody in the room has ever met you, and they're reading down your resume, your application, your performance on the interview, trying to make a decision, and there's some question about whether Bob's a good guy or not. Well, here's a recommendation. Let's call it. They got to be able to do that. Not the company email, your personal email. Not a phone number that you might be at, your cell phone. So we call that up and we talk to the guy right at the point, relieve ourselves of this angst about this, and you get hired. Or we can send a company email and wait 2 weeks for you to check company mail, and by then we've forgotten all about it. Personal contact information on the letter of recommendation from a person that works at the company, hopefully that you've flown with. That is a powerful recommendation. That's your goal. All right? Short of that's fine, but do the best. Put it all together. Make a copy. Remember we said knowing yourself. Knowing yourself, what is yourself to them? It is the application, the resume. That's the paperwork. That's all they got. They don't know anymore. So make sure you know that inside out. Keep your file active by updating. You need to go touch that file every so often. After 6 months or a year on these electronic processes, if you haven't been to visit, it just drops away. And if there was a line, and there is a line, you're now at the bottom of it again. Okay? Don't let it go inactive. All right, let's talk about the interview. This is what you're going to see in the last part of the day are the slides from the face-to-face interview and this study guide. This is a secure PDF. Normally 99 would be 25 off for you guys, so 75. And this would be available to you as a secure PDF. You would be able to go to it. It's 30 days. If you don't have an interview, it's 30 days and then it goes away. You get an interview, we give it back to you for 2 weeks. If you have an interview, it's from when you call us to your interview. A couple of days later, it goes away. These are ebooks that you can purchase for additional. The technical questions in this book are listed in our flashcards. All of them. There's 118 Delta ones, and those are aeronautical knowledge. And then there are 500 and some other ones from all the airlines, grouped by topic, answers and references provided. And then a whole bunch of HR questions with no answers because those have to come from you. Okay. Cheryl Cage's Checklist for Success, technical interviews. Now this is not an airline interview book, but quite honestly, the problems we have in the interview don't have anything to do with being a pilot. They're all about personal interviewing skills, which are, this is a good one. So, overview, the interview comes from the paperwork or online application. The job offer comes from interview performance. So what you do that day is going to get you or lose you that job. If you have a bad day or you weren't prepared, it's not going to work out. And in many cases, if it was the testing, you come back and do it again in 6 months. If it was the personal interview at Delta, that's it. You don't come back. So 50-50 is a one-time deal. The other part you can redo. So you'll be evaluated on your personality, corporate fit. They basically have to like you. Let's say you're a guy that doesn't have a perfect record, which is like every one of us in the room. So you need a little bit of a break. Maybe you need a big break, maybe you need a little break. Who gets a break? Who do you give breaks to? Strangers? Yeah, not so much. You know, I don't know them, I don't trust them, I don't like them. You know? But people I give breaks to, I get to know and like. So in this interview, you have to be known You have to give full disclosure, talk openly about yourself. They have to like you, you know. If they don't get to know you and like you, then you're not likely to get a break. If you have powerful recommendations, that makes it easier for me to give you a break. Because if I'm giving you a break by myself, the weight of that decision is on me. If you screw up, it's on me. But if I have 3 or 4 quality recommendations, and I've known Bob a really long time, I've flown with Bob, he's a good pilot, now that's not just my decision. Other people are helping me make that decision. So that's why recommendations, especially from company employees, are so important. So you say like you. How do we do this like you thing? How do you do the like you thing? How does that work? I really want this person to like me. The number one thing, smile, okay? You've got to smile, which means you've got to be comfortable enough with what you're doing to smile. I mean, if you're all tensed up, it's hard to smile, and if you do, it looks more like a grimace, you know? You've got to smile. Consequently, you have to be well prepared enough that this can be a little bit of fun. I mean, yeah, it's your career, but if you're tight and tense about it, it isn't going to work, and smiling breaks the tension. Matter of fact, Kimberly and I, not too long ago, what, 5, 7, 8 years ago, did a workshop for the Aloha pilots, and their fate was grim. And I'm talking about this same topic. And I tell folks about smiling. And the next day, we went up Diamond Head. I had one day off. We went and did some workshops for ATA. And I was going up the hill with Tom Wykor. And I said, Tom, remember what I talked about yesterday about not smiling? We're going to go up the hill, and we're not going to say a thing to anybody. We're going to look at our shoes, walk up. We'll see how it goes. Talk across all kinds of people. Here, talking German, Italian, all kinds of stuff. Nobody said anything to anybody. I said, okay, going back down the hill, we're going to look everybody in the eye. We're going to smile and say good morning. And we got good mornings in 5 different languages. I have no idea what they said in most cases, but they were smiling and nodding as we went by. How do you want your interview to go? You know, that's what it's about. You're trying to be likable means smiling, looking people in the eye, being sincere. Okay? Technical qualifications really aren't an issue here. They're not an issue in this program, and they're not an issue at most interviews. If you weren't qualified, you wouldn't be in the room. Don't feel like, well, God, that guy's got 15,000 and I got 5,000. How can I possibly get this job? You're in the room. You're in the game. All right? They don't hire the most qualified person. I can guarantee you, I've kept stats on this for 30 years. When I look at the stats of the people they hired versus the people they interviewed, there is no difference. No difference, meaning they did not pick the most qualified people from the group. They hired the people they like from the people that met minimum qualifications. Your job is to be the person they like. Okay? If you need them to believe a story, they have to like you, get to know you, believe your story to get a break. In this case, the break could be the job. Appearance, very important. All right? Part of that initial thing is before you ever say or do anything. They're looking you over. They're visualizing you in their uniform. Can I see this person as a Delta United American pilot? So our advice is going to be dark suit, white shirt, okay? Over-the-calf socks, plain-toed shoes, tight haircut, little sun if necessary, if you look like Casper the Ghost in the wintertime. You know, you need to look like their commercial. You need to be that person. Take care of yourself. You know, present well, lose a few pounds, okay? Shave off the facial hair. You know, this is really important that you have this look. So they're going to walk up, you're going to be sitting. You're going to have your coat unbuttoned so it doesn't wrinkle while you're sitting. When you stand up, you're going to button your coat. You're going to shake hands. When you shake hands, you're going to put web to web. Because if you get out here on the fingertips and they got a ring and you squeeze, it hurts. How's the warm, fuzzy feeling doing? Not so good, okay? If you can't get to the web, don't squeeze, okay? Simple as that. If we do it straight up and down, we're equal. If my palm is up, I'm submissive. And if my palm is on top, I'm aggressive. Hi, how are you doing? You know, maybe not. Since this person now controls the career decision that will control the rest of your life, maybe you don't want to squeeze and force them to the floor with your palm on top. May not be the best approach to this thing. Okay, in a sales meeting somewhere and you're selling cars, that might work, you know. All right. So who's evaluating you? Everybody's evaluating you. We hear on a regular basis guys on the way to the interview in the van end up with an argument with the van driver or the lady at the desk at the hotel or the receptionist once you get there. Everybody's watching all the time. So I'm going to say from the time you get the first email until you interview, till you get hired, plus 365 days, plus one more day in case you miscounted, you're going to be on your best behavior with everybody. If you need to take a good scream, go in the closet and take a good scream. Do not display inappropriate emotions or actions in front of anybody in this process. You are on your best behavior all the time. Lots of guys. We know a guy that argued over they got his birth date wrong, which got his seniority position wrong on the seniority list, and he's arguing about it, and for long he didn't have to worry about arguing about it. Then he went from having an inappropriate seniority number to having no seniority number. Okay? Everybody's evaluating you. Selection process. Telephone interview, a couple of airlines using that. If that's coming, if you're on the sofa on your second beer, it's not time for a phone interview. Okay? You're not home. Under control, noise-controlled environment, preparation, know what's coming, ready to answer the questions. Now you're ready for a phone interview. Of course, they can come unannounced. One-on-one panel interview, typically HR rejects about 70% of the candidates. Pilots typically like pilots. We don't like to do negative things. The HR lady, she's the one sitting there going, this guy just really doesn't fit our profile. Maybe it's because you're talking only to the pilots and not giving her any attention. Maybe it's because the woman on the panel is the pilot and the HR person is the man in the room. And you're trying to do what you think is right. You've got to talk to no one person in that room can hire you. Not that day. And Delta's as close as it gets with a job offer right after the interview. But in most cases, they can't hire you. Can they not hire you? Oh yeah. Any one of them does this as it goes forward, it doesn't work. So every person has importance in that interview. Respect. Someday the HR lady may be a clerk and you're the captain, but today she's in charge. It's like a dance, They walk up, you stand up. They go in the office, they sit down, you sit down. You're attuned to their actions and rhythms. You know the story about the guy, the Texas guy that doesn't buy his picante sauce from the guy from New York? That's a true story, okay? Not because the picante sauce is no good, but because this person talks really fast, and we don't trust people in Texas that talk really fast. And the other way, the New Yorker doesn't buy his stuff from the guy from Georgia because he talks really slow, and everybody knows slow is stupid. You've got to match the rhythm. When you go into this interview in Georgia for Delta, you think there might be a good old boy in the room? Odds are good, okay? And your job is to match the pace, noise level, the volume, to match your interviewers. If you're way up here or way down here, it's inappropriate. I've sold on the phone my entire life, and the first thing I do when they start talking is I match whatever they're doing. And they trust me. They listen to me. And if I don't do that, if I ignore them, even though it might be my normal style, it doesn't work as well. You're selling yourself in this interview. Pay attention to the body language. When they start closing up the papers, ask you, do you have any questions for us? Guess what? We're coming to the end of this interview. They got 6 more to do. You can't take a 15-minute dissertation now about why you want to work for Delta. All right? You can ask for the job. If they ask about the question, you can say, well, you don't have questions, a few things about how you prepared. But taking a lot of time right now is inappropriate. If it's inappropriate, the warm, fuzzy feeling goes right at the end of the interview. And the next thing they're going to do is score you. Not a good plan. Stay tuned. All right, so flight department, sometimes flight department's in charge of this process, other times it's HR. Simulator evaluation and testing, final selection board, you're not there. Your interviewers aren't there. Only your scoring on this evaluation process survives. Conditional offer, Delta makes that earlier than most airlines. You're going to get a medical background check and your recommendations considered. In other processes, if they don't have this online system like airline apps, you want to take a copy of your recommendations with you and have them available at the interview. Because it would not be unheard of for a quality recommendation not to have made it to your file. And right after that, they're going to decide. So you want to make sure it's in there. Just ask, do you have my recommendations from so-so and so-and-so? Target selection, yes. There's times that questions can be answered yes or no, but most of the time, if we're trying to get to know you, we're not going to give you questions that are yes or no. Do you do drugs? No. Okay, that's a yes or no question. But I'm going to ask you questions that have you open up and tell me about yourself. Situation, action, result, storytelling. And that's when you come to our practice interview, we're going to listen to these stories. And we're going to say, don't like that story, It sort of leads off in the weeds. You do some things that are good, but you do some things that are bad. If we leave them out, the story doesn't hold up. So let's not use that one. Give me another one. Go to your spouse, go to your friends, talk about it, develop some stories. Well, that's a pretty good story. That's a 3 or 4, but it could be better. You had this and this, and you forgot to tell me about it. If you tell me about it, the score will come up. You said this or this, it wasn't necessary to the story, leave it out, the score will come up. Okay, so we're trying to improve your score, and you have to do that with practice. It's behavior-based. Use specific life examples. Great impact with these life examples. But you can't give an example for everything in the interview. It's going to take all day. You got to pick a couple of key times, your best stories, and give them an example. I'm professional. I'm punctual. Doesn't mean a thing, but give me a little story about how you did. I work well with people. Okay, well, tell me that story about how you worked with that irate passenger and got them to calm down and whatever. Give me that story, because that story will cement that. Now, again, can't tell a story for everything. Appearance. We talked about it already. So think about the uniform, how will you look? Behaviors checked actually begins with your initial contact. Best behavior at all times, including the phone, previous mistakes. Okay, they're going to take, most cases, they're going to take this on a case-by-case basis. Now, if you had 3 DUIs last year, that's not going to be a case-by-case basis. But if you have something that could be acceptable, they're going to listen to your story, hopefully get to know you, okay, like you, believe your story, give you a break. That's sort of how it works. Okay, would it be the first thing you want to talk about? Yeah, probably not. Okay, hi. I had a DUI yesterday, not the right thing. But if you got to the end of the interview and you had not talked about one of these negative areas that we knew was going to come up in the background check because we checked our records and it says, I have a check ride failure for this, and it hasn't come up, you're going to have to bring it up, because while you're there, you got to talk about it. If you don't talk about it and they find it on the background check and you're not there, odds are not good, okay? You need to talk about those issues. So hopefully somewhere in the middle. We'd rather do it in the middle. But if it got all the way done and we hadn't brought it up and we knew the background check was going to produce this negative item, we would have to talk about it. Survivable if you talk about it with them. Otherwise, it's just lying. They don't know the truth. They just compare the paperwork. What you said doesn't match the background check. What else didn't he tell me about? Okay. Tips for success. Be prepared, man. We've hit that one hard enough. Know your job and yourself. Know your plane, Review your own paperwork, your own application, so you're very familiar with it. Know your company. No matter what you might think of the company or how poorly you might have been treated, what you think about your company today, I'm going to think you're going to think that about my company. So if you're mad as hell and pissed off about what's going on here, I don't really want you inside the chicken fence at Delta. I don't want you inside the compound. You have got to find a way to be positive. Find the good things about this job and tell them about it with a smile on your face. Okay? Because it is your key to getting the next and better job. You can't get on somebody else's back, the stupid check pilot, the damn company, whatever it is, you're not going to get there on somebody else's back. It's going to be your own strengths. Be enthusiastic. So we asked the guy, here's Bob, young guy, looks sharp, doing good. We got another guy, 25 years with the company, 15,000 hours, looking really good. Bob gets the job. More experienced guy doesn't get the job. We take him out. We have job fairs. We had hundreds of representatives. We take them out. We get them drunk. We say, okay, why did you hire Bob and not Jim? Jim was, twice the qualifications. I said, well, Jim, he's sort of quiet, sat on his hands, didn't say much, wasn't very animated. He's obviously a well-qualified pilot, but I just didn't get a good feeling about it. Well, how about Bob here? A third the flight time, So, well, Bob, Bob was pretty excited about this job. The tongue was sort of going side to side and slobber coming out and the tail was wagging. This guy was a happy puppy. He was so glad to be here. If I brought him inside the compound here at Delta, he's going to have an infectious enthusiasm for this job that outweighs the other guy's experience. Who are you going to be? Okay? So I'm interviewing with Delta. I'm interviewing with United. I've been in the airline business. I've been at Braniff, Capital, Republic. And I'm interviewing with United. I've been a DC-8 captain, flown all over the world, and I'm going to be a 727 flight engineer for United for God knows how long. Traffic at 12 o'clock. How excited can I be about this? And yet, outside in the hall, as I was sitting on the chair waiting to interview, I realized that I had to be this happy puppy at 37 years old with 8,000 hours. I had to get pumped up, and I literally sort of hyperventilated. And during my interview, at the end of my interview, they said, Mr. Darby, why are you so excited about working for United Airlines? Boy, I was ready for that one. Equipment, bases, all the things that I could tell them about why I liked United Airlines. And they actually said, why are you so excited about working? Because I'm an older guy. At the time, way older. I mean, there weren't a lot of guys getting hired at 37 when I did it. So this concept of the happy puppy, I've got to get you doing that. You know, if you can't get excited about this job, you can't get excited about anything. This is the rest of your life. At one of the top companies in the world, you should be able to get excited about it. Have fun, you know. Part of my takeoff briefing, first words of my takeoff briefing, I'm here to have fun. Okay? We got to find a way, enough preparation, enough confidence on your part to have a little fun in this interview. Smiling and a little bit of fun. You're gonna, not a comedian, you know, not bringing up knock-knock jokes. But if the time comes during the thing to smile at yourself or someone else, you should do so. Okay? If you get so tense, sometimes they ask a question, technical, that we should know everything about, and we just freeze up. We smile at ourselves and say, you know, I do that every day. Tell them a little bit about what you do know about it. You know, before long you start remembering things, you're back in the flow again. It's not a big deal. You do get turned down. You know, the fact that you got interviewed is a good sign. You know, when you get interviewed by any other company than Delta, you would be qualifying for other companies simultaneously. Other opportunities are going to come. Stay in the game. Create lots of interview opportunities. I mean, the odds are only so good at each opportunity. The best odds overall are to create multiple interview opportunities. So work hard to get multiple offers. Don't work on one company and then another and then another. Pilots are bad about that. Positive rate, gear up, you know, flaps up. And we love this checklist thing, but it's terrible for a job search. You ever seen your spouse cook dinner? You know, talking on the phone, doing the laundry, cooking the meat, heating up the vegetables, got everything going at the same time, taking care of 2 kids and feeding the dog. That's how you run a job search, because you never know which one of these, you're going to pull the meat out of the thing and it's frozen solid. It takes 3 months to thaw it out. But you, on the checklist, you weren't going to pull it out till last. You get it all going. If you can identify an item that takes longer, start on that one first. You know, I don't have a 4-year degree. Well, guess what? We need to start on that first, because that's going to take the longest. You've got to keep all this stuff going simultaneously. It is not a 1, 2, 3 business. You know, well, we're going to the movies. Oh, right, go to the movie checklist. We're going to turn off the lights, turn down the heat. By the time we get done with the checklist, the movie's over. You know, job search is like multitasking. Get it all going at one time. You do improve with practice. Other airlines will interview you, therefore don't stop trying. Okay, quick note on the medical. You do need, if you have any medical issues, the FAA just makes sure that you're safe for 6 months at a time. The airlines, they're worried about you for a career, long term, all right? So exhibit the highest degree of safety. They have a legal liability for what you do. Not a whole lot of medicals going on past the FAA medical, but if you have an issue, once you get the job, a job offer, they can now do the medical, and you need to be able to document and talk about your problems. What they don't like are transient problems, things that aren't resolved. You need to get the paperwork, get the current tests done, have them available. If they bring it up, you have the documentation. If you don't do that, then they bring them up. They say, we're going to need this, this, and this. When you get that stuff, send it in, and we'll take a look at it. And now 3 months go by before you get the job. So you have a known issue that's likely to come up at an airline that you know gives a physical, that you need to document and bring it with you. We have a doctor you can use. The idea is, what would the FAA want to see in this area? It's going to be about the same thing the airline's going to want to see if you're going to be long-term durable for them. When an airline pilot falls out in the later years of his career, costs the airlines probably $500,000. So it's a reasonable question from their point of view. Now, are they allowed to discriminate on things that would keep you from, unless they keep you from doing the job, they're no longer allowed to discriminate. The American with Disabilities Act says if you've got a 300-pound pilot and he can still do the job, you can't not hire a 300-pound pilot. Are there other ways to eliminate 300-pound pilots in the process before they get to that point? There are. So don't hide behind this. Do all the things. You should be jogging and eating birdseed here to get this job. Medical history, physical exam, most use an FAA standard. They are allowed to come above the FAA standard if they can prove that it affects your ability to do the job. Medical history, if you have had a broken bone or been unconscious or any of that kind of stuff, we should talk about it later. Come see me. They're going to get your personal. They can't really get your military records. They can get your FAA records, and they will. Okay, the pirate report is 1 page. It says you got these licenses, you got this medical on this date, whether you have any accidents, incidents, or violations, and that's pretty much it. And that's what most airlines do. They used to get your full records and make that check themselves, the ones that did it. The trouble is a lot of them didn't do anything. So now they have the law, which makes the ones that used to do more, all they got to do is the 1 page. That's what they do. So you have a right to see that. You should request that information when you have that right, so you know what it says. Body mass index, if you're going for a foreign job, this is not part of the U.S., it'd be illegal in the United States, but it's not illegal overseas. So body mass index is checked for foreign employment. And even though most Americans are overweight or obese, they will tolerate slightly into the overweight category for overseas airlines. They will not tolerate the upper end of overweight or obese. So if you're trying to get a foreign job, you need to be within these guidelines. There's a body mass index chart in your workbook if you want to check where you stand. High school weight is ideal. Restrict weight loss to 14 days prior. You cannot go in there not having drunk water, not having had proper nourishment, not having had proper rest, and expect this big day that you have and the score from it to get you the job to come out like you want. So normally hydrate, eat properly, get your rest. This is the big deal. Take care of yourself like a professional athlete here. Blood pressure, medications. If you're on medications, make sure you know what they are and the dosages. Vision. If you're going to get corrective vision surgery, which is permissible now, make sure you don't do it right before the interview. If you want to control it, that's fine. Do it early. Do it after you get the job, plus a year, plus a day. But don't do it in the employment process. Go out and get the excimer laser or Ortho-K or any of that stuff. The excimer laser is superior. Color vision, muscle balance. Anybody with a color vision issue? Okay, the Ishihara test is really tough. There are other tests, same test value, that are easier, so you can get that certified before you go in. Hearing. A lot of older pilots probably have some hearing loss in the room. Don't compound your hearing loss with your ride to the airport in an open motorcycle with pipes on it. Don't use the chainsaw the day before. Don't use your wife's 40 horsepower hairdryer that day. Put earplugs in a couple of days before and wear them all the way to the medical. Okay? Control what you can. The other part, in most cases, you're going to be okay. They tolerate a reasonable amount of hearing loss, but don't compound it with short-term loss. A NASCAR race ringside the day before would be a really bad idea. Stress tests, if you have a problem, make sure you get it and get it documented. There's a lot of false indications in stress EKGs. Total cholesterol, nobody's actually allowed to check that other than advise you after you get the job. But if you want to keep the job for a long time, you're talking to a guy with a heart attack and 5 stents. I eventually figured out what I had to do with my diet to control it. I would prefer you figure out what to do with your diet now. If you're looking at books, look at the China study or preventing and reversing heart disease. By the way, they did operations on young military men that were from the war. Almost all of them had the beginnings of heart disease. In our country, it's extremely prevalent. So if you want to keep this job all the way to 65, you got to maintain a medical. You need to take care of yourself if you plan to do that. It's harder than it sounds, okay? And the last 5 years would be worth what? $1 million? Yeah, $1 million easy, okay? Okay, so low fat, high fiber diet, all that good stuff. I won't spend time on it. 6 months prior, change what you can, know the potential of what you can't, gather documents and do the test before going in if you have any issues. Immediately prior, avoid strenuous exercise. I mean, for some guys, a marathon is strenuous exercise, but for most people, 2 miles or more is strenuous exercise. So don't get crazy here. Don't fast. Don't get drunk. The book on the left is a good overview. The one on the right is out of print, but it is available on eBay and so forth. All right, technical interview. We talked about questions. These books are rolled into our flashcards. Great source of information. The difference between FARs is that your company manual integrates a lot of that stuff. And it's really hard to separate the company procedures from the government procedures. So reading the Aeronautical Information Manual and some basic knowledge of the FARs is a good idea. I'd rather you study those than your company manual where we can't tell what's Endeavor procedure and FAR. It gets all rolled together. You need aviation weather. This book for Delta, Aerodynamics for Naval Aviators, that is the Bible. You'll see questions word for word out of there. You don't need the workbook unless you're taking an academic course. Don't let them sell you that. But this book, Aerodynamics for Naval Aviators, is probably the single best source of aeronautical knowledge questions for Delta. So you had to have one book, that would be it for that topic. Instrument flying. This book is a tremendous reference. It takes wheels to carry it around. It's maybe available electronic now. I'll have to check that out. But it's a great book. Brings it all together. It's indexed. You can go find what you want. And if you had to have one book other than Naval Aviators, that would be the one. Technical interview is closely parallels an oral exam. We sort of know what's coming. I mean, you have guidelines from them online, tells you the topics, it gives you the books. Regrettably, the books would fill up a wheelbarrow, so you don't have time to read and study all the books. That's why things like the flashcards, which pick out actual questions from all that, can really concentrate your study. So do that, and then if you have weak areas or something, go read that area in the book. But don't read the whole book trying to get ready for a few questions. You don't have time. You should review no NOS, just Jeppesen charts, aeronautical information manual, aerodynamics, instrument procedures, weather, and good news, no technical questions during the personal interview at Delta. Okay, so that's not an issue. They feel their aeronautical knowledge test covers that for them. We don't have anybody that's been asked a technical question. So it's not going to be, how long does it take to dump fuel, blah, 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 or when would you start down? None of that. No public math. It's good. So if you happen to get to something you don't know, admit that you don't know it. It's very important. We don't hire people that don't know what they don't know. That's the worst offense. Okay? Not to know it's bad, but not to know you don't know it, that's really bad. That's called bullshit. Okay? So no bullshitting in this interview. You're guaranteed that we won't like that. If you don't know, tell them you don't know. Tell them what you do know. I said, I'm not sure about what the roll in on the arc at 300 knots is, but it has to do with ground speed, and before long you figure out the answer. Or you get something. But we're hiring 1 to 5. All right? If you give me no answer and you don't know where to look, I can't give you any points. But if you don't know exactly the answer, tell me what you do know, tell me where you'd find it. I can get you up to a 2 or 3 and get you the job. So don't just go, duh, I don't know. All right? Do what you can. Now don't be too surprised when you say, well, I would look that up in the Aeronautical Information Manual. They may have one of those in the room. Okay, so still no bullshitting. I'm not sure. I think that would be in the Aeronautical Information Manual. Okay, military guys, IFR supplement, you know. Oh yeah, here's one. Great. So tell them where the answer can be found. Anything on your current aircraft. I mean, you think they got guys that have flown 50-seat RJs in their workforce? Probably do. Would one of them be a candidate for your interview? Probably would. So know your plane, types of engines, hydraulic electrical system, icing systems. One thing we know pilots ask is things they know the answer to. What do they know the answer to? What was just covered in their seasonal review. Going into summertime, thunderstorm flying, blah, blah, blah. Going into winter, icing procedures, runway, you know, that's what they're up on. People don't ask stuff they don't know. So make sure you know what they know. What do you like most or least about your current airplane? Of course, followed by, tell me about that system. So be careful what you like and don't like. You might get to talk about it. What system you like most, FARs, weather. Very common to hand out an approach plate and say, brief the approach. Okay, so here it is. ILS 32, tell me what your briefing would be. Discuss holding patterns, very common. Lighting for these, especially for the freight companies that are out there flying at night. We almost every couple of months have somebody at night turn off between the taxiways onto the grass. So they're going to want to know that you know how to read and interpret that lighting. Written testing could be computer-based as well, of course. Aptitude and intelligence, looking at analytical skills, technical skills, knowledge of regulations, basic flying and weather. This is a huge pile of books again, just more than you can do. So concentrate on the actual questions we know are being asked. Personality test, we got desirable, undesirable, patterns, and honesty. We've tested our own pilots. We have a profile of what we like. When you go through something like the MMPI, they ask the same question 6 different ways. If you're not consistent between the answers, it puts a mark. You put about 5 or 6 marks in this box, the test is unusable, you do not get the job. The only way to not put marks in that box is to be consistent. It's okay to have problems in your background, a little petty thievery, bedwetting, whatever it is. You got to be honest, because honest is the only way you can keep out of this inconsistency box, which will knock you right out of the box. All right. MMPI is Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, and it's like 560 questions. TCU is a Texas Christian University similar test. hard to prepare for, just be honest. Answer on your first impulse. Don't go back and change answers. It's mom, apple pie, Chevrolet, and I'm going to be a captain someday. All right? Types of tests, stress tests. You're thinking, hey, I fly out of Kennedy in the wintertime, in the snowstorm. How can they stress me? I've seen it all. Okay, well, here's 50 questions, and here's time to answer 30 questions. And your $10.2 million job rides on it, go. All right? That's stress, okay? Most people don't finish most of these tests, okay? So don't be surprised. We've had people get up and leave the room because they didn't finish the test and obviously couldn't be an airline pilot, even though they've been doing it for 10 years. Keep flying the plane. Take the test. Do the best you can. I won't give you specific examples of tests. So practice on a sample test. Be well prepared. Read the instructions. If you're not sure of the instructions, ask. It's very important you know what you're doing here. Know how the test will be scored. In most cases, there's no penalty for guessing. It's simply the maximum number of right answers, so you want to go. But if there was a penalty for guessing, some airlines have those types of tests, you would need to know. Be aware of time. So one of these watches you can take off and set here. They're probably not going to let your cell phone or anything be in there because it can have too much information in it. So you might want a regular old watch that folds up, stop, so you know the time. Because if there's no penalty for guessing and there's 5 more to go, A is not a bad answer. On some books, the test books where they still use written books, they're not supposed to write in the book. But pilots typically put their pencil where the one they think they like in the multiple choice, and then if it's correct, they move it to the answer sheet. Guess what? Even if they erase it out, there's a little dimple by where their pencil was. So in the absence of knowledge, dimples work really good. Okay? Sometimes there's still pencil marks there. They haven't cleaned them up yet. Most of them are computer-based. Intelligence, aptitude, behavior patterns, reaction to stress, psychological profile. They can do all of these different things. We have some books. That one's not really current anymore. But these are good. Of course, they're all back to the basic references. Simulator check. United's doing that. A couple of others. Demonstrate your flying skill. Be prepared to demonstrate basic instrument flying, turns, and control maneuvers. You're saying no sweat. Yeah, when's the last time you flew basic instruments in your airplane? That means the flight director was off, auto throttles off, autopilot off, flying basic instruments. Put yourself in holding one time on your home sim, or fly the airplane by hand for the approach, all the way to altitude. You need to be working on this. Our basic instrument skills deteriorate pretty fast. The people that fly the same airplane all the time, virtually all airline pilots, have their skills deteriorate because we don't have to think about what we're doing. We've done it so much, wing goes down, we know just what it takes to bring it back. Looks really nice. New airplane, never flown it before, wing goes down, we have no idea what it takes to bring it back. Maybe it's not enough, maybe it's too much, maybe it's not enough, maybe it's too much. And we start, does this guy know how to fly or not? It breaks our own confidence, takes away from our mental processes because we got holding and approaches to do. You need to get some basic instrument practice. Hopefully in the same home sim or actual simulator that you're going to fly. Really going to make a difference. Typical maneuvers include you're going to take off, climb, accelerate, hold, come back and do an instrument approach, maybe a go around. That's all it's going to be. There's no major airlines that have engine failures or unusual attitudes or anything demanding. CRM techniques, you do briefings. You don't take off without a briefing. You don't land without a briefing. This would not be the time to start doing that. Include your normal processes, normal call-outs. 1 or 2 airlines want you to use their call-outs, pretty tough to do, but at least do your own briefings and call-outs. And if you can add theirs in there and they want that, cool. Use checklists, brief your crew, act and dress like an interview. Just because this thing's at 2 o'clock at night when the sim's available doesn't mean you can go in there in your scruffy old blue jeans and go out afterwards and have 3 beers and need to be carried home by the instructor. He can have 3 beers, you can carry him home, that might be worth extra points, but you can't be carrying you home. Practice in a real simulator aircraft. Review the company profile. Online, there's good information about what these profiles are looking at. Look at the approach plates. Be familiar with the holding. Get a situational awareness. The guy's going to say turn left to such and such a VOR. Be really handy to know whether that was north or south, so to get a feel for it. The aircraft layout, okay? Be well rested. So not too many of these round dial guys that left. This is our typical briefing, takeoff, level, steep turns, track to a VOR, hold, ILS, and landing. That's about 98% of all the profiles. So straight and level. If you haven't reviewed basic instruments, straight means we're not turning. There is a turn and bank in some airplanes, probably not in these. So you put those two triangles at the top together, you're not turning. So in a new airplane, when you're not really sure how it feels, remember that. Level, altimeter, not up or down. Some of them have IVSI, some don't. The 717, for instance, not an IVSI. So you need to sort of know what you're dealing with. Practice that. Give me just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You're probably in the 5 minutes, convince yourself that a little practice here might be a good idea. And even 5 minutes thinking about it will improve your performance. So we got a mini glass here on the MD-11. Okay, so straight and level, altimeters. Could look like this. Level turns. 25 degrees of bank, not 30. 30 is the limit. Don't want to go over the limit. Not sure what that takes, so we don't use 30. We use 25, so we don't go over. Some of them are computer scored and actually take off points if you exceed limits. So you want to stay in the zone as long as possible. If you get out of the zone, you want to correct back as quickly as you can. So still using two instruments, right? Top of the attitude indicator, altimeter. They're side by side. Monkey can do two things. Okay, lots of bananas piling up. Monkey's doing good. Straight climbs and descents. We should know the power setting for 500 or 1,000 feet a minute up or down. As soon as you start flying this airplane, figure out what that is. Typically, 1,000 pounds of fuel on 2 or 3 or 4 engines, whatever you got, 1,000 pounds of fuel flow is 1,000 feet a minute. Typically, on the smaller planes, fuel flow equals airspeed. 250 knots is 2,500 pounds. You add a zero. Won't be exact, it'll be close. Figure out what the difference is, and 300 knots would also be that same difference off of 3,000 pounds. So figure those things out so you have less mental work to do to get the airplane where you want it. Climbing and ascending turns, monkeys beware, okay? This may be more than two things, and we might not get the banana on this one. This is as tough as it gets. In your airplane, turn left, descend to such and such, no problem. You roll into a descending right turn, perfect. Strange airplane, odds are real low that that's going to happen. What is the power setting for 1,000 feet a minute? Established, steady, 25 degrees of bank. Or 25 degrees of bank, turn looks good, power back, descent, but not rolling in at night in a strange airplane to a descending, climbing, or descending turn. It's risky. So practice these basic techniques. People we worry about the most, weak basic instrument skills. Could happen to an airline pilot, okay? Over trimming high-speed trim. You're used to high-speed trim, but this one's a different high-speed trim. Still faster or slower than you're used to. So over-controlling with trim is a problem. Failure to use trim to relieve control pressures. Some of these airplanes, 717, modern airplane, flight control system designed with the original DC-9, the thing handles like a truck. So if you don't trim this thing, you're going to be going around this steep turn with like 30 pounds of pressure, and you're distracted and, trim it, okay? Over-controlling sensitive ailerons can be very sensitive. Get this walking going. What's the secret? The two triangles together, okay? Don't do this. Use rudder in symmetrical flight. These older simulators, they typically give sim checks in. The visuals aren't too good, and if you want to see them really go wacko, push the rudders a little bit, okay? Stay off the rudders. Fixation on visual reference. The worst thing they can do to you is say, okay, 15 miles out, clear day, there's the runway, land. Oh, God. I've seen experienced pilots in new airplanes literally roll it upside down trying to do that. You must continue to fly basic instruments to the runway. You're real good at the center line, that becomes your localizer. VASI or whatever becomes your glide slope. Assign yourself a rate of descent. What is an instrument approach except a heading and a rate of descent? Do that. Do not look out there and go, I got this. Yeah. Okay, so make it work for you. Practice basic instruments. Not using control rates of climb and descent. The law allows you to use 500 feet a minute for the last 1,000. Unless instructed otherwise in a strange airplane, that would be a really good idea. The last thing you want to do is go bombing down to this thing at 2,000 feet a minute and have no idea of what the level, pitch, attitude, and power setting is. The guessing is not a good time for guessing. 500 feet a minute, by the time you figure that out, it'll be time to level off. And the errors will be small. Before, practice the profile in the same sim. Fly your current aircraft by hand, review the aircraft layout, approaches, and airports. Carry something to write with. The guy's going to say, yep, hold left turns at such and such, EFC such and such. You got it, write it down. Carry a pin light. You get in the airplane, got this marvelous electric seat and all this kind of stuff, and the guy says, just pull your seat forward, Next thing you know, you're going through the roof. Oh, it's the third button. pin light and I can make it happen. Without a pin light, I'm like, you got about a 1 in 6 chance of getting the right button. So carry a pin light and a pin. People we worry about, low time, not in the room here. No or limited recent experience, not a problem. No motion sim experience, not a problem. Sim instruments different than aircraft, well, if it was round dials, we'd be in trouble. Okay, recent experience in just one aircraft, that's everybody. Okay, so this is our problem. Don't take this lightly because you're currently qualified and experienced on one airplane. I guarantee that the sim check will not be in a CRJ, 50-seat airplane, guaranteed.